it done. Get it done. You've heard it from my guest, James Chestnut III of James Chestnut and Associates, helping churches get organized, helping churches with their financial structure, their 501s. You need to know about that. And if you want to give them a call, the number to call is 281-441-4431. Now, you talked also about taxes and accounting. Let's break that down.
Well, as nonprofit organizations, which basically is a broad way of classifying churches and public charities, they don't pay any taxes. Okay, the only taxes that a nonprofit organization is responsible for is payroll taxes that are paid to the Internal Revenue Service. And so it's very important that if you don't get anything else right in your church or in your ministry or your charity, that you get the payroll right. Okay, starting in 84, it was law that that nonprofit organizations had to withhold payroll taxes from their employees. That's FICA and federal tax. Okay. And so we can't stress that enough. That we know that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against spirits and principalities and wickedness in high places. And if the enemy is going to attack your organization, if he's going to attack your church, it's going to be through your payroll. Okay, and he's going to use the government to do it. And that's the only wedge they have to get in the door is through the payroll taxes and the way you handle your books. So
well, for those who may need some clarity, let's break that down. And you said they're employees, and then of course there's also independent contractors, and you said that FICA and federal income. You didn't mention Social Security. How does that work?
Well, Social Security and Medicare together, it gives you your FICA, but when it's all said and done, you have two classifications of people or persons that you pay. Employees are individuals that you hire where you control the outcome of what they do and the way in which they do it. Okay, and there are some other key characterizations of an employee, but an independent contractor is completely different. Okay, you're not responsible for withholding Social Security and Medicare and federal tax from an independent contractor. That being said, no one in your church is an independent contractor. From the pastor to the musician, everyone is an employee. Okay, and you are responsible for withholding the payroll taxes according to IRS guidelines.
Let's define it. Who qualifies to be called an independent contractor?
Okay.
What are the guidelines?
Okay. Well, let's say, for instance, your church hires a plumber to come out to the church to do some work. That plumber is going to tell you what day and at what time he's going to come out. And in addition to that, when he comes, he's going to bring his own tools and his own equipment to get the job done. And better yet, he may not even come. He may send someone that works for him to do the work. Okay? So if you pay that person, that plumber, $1,000 to come out to your church, he's not going to pocket $1,000. He's got to pay his help. He's got to pay for his equipment and his materials and his supplies. He may actually only pocket $300 of that $1,000 that you paid him. Okay, and matter of fact, not only does he have to pay for all those other things, he has to pay his self-employment tax, and he's got to pay his own federal tax. Okay, when he files his tax return at the end of the year. And so that's what makes him an independent contractor. He's going to be responsible for his own taxes at the end of the year, and he's got to pay for all those other business expenses as well.
When do you give out a 1099?
The 1099 is given out at the end of the tax year. Just like you give out W-2s, that's the same time you would give out the 1099s. But you only give a 1099 out to independent contractors that you've paid more than $600. Anybody who's gotten less than $600, you're not required. It's still probably a good practice to do it, but it's not a requirement.
Okay. So make note of the guidelines. If you have any questions, you just need to call James Chestnut and Associates, and that number to call is 281-441-4431. So the clarity has to be with understanding the difference between an independent contractor and an employee. And what you're saying is whoever the church controls and provides the tools to work with around the church, like the custodian or whatever, and they are on a fixed schedule and they're under the church's control, that's an employee. But someone who has to bring their own tools and that's from outside and they control their own schedule, then that basically is an independent contractor.
Yes, sir. And also it's important to realize when a church volunteer becomes an employee, okay? And what the IRS says is that anyone that you pay more than $100 is your employee. If you pay them more than $100 during the year, that person is your employee, and you are required to withhold the proper payroll taxes, the Social Security, the Medicare, and the federal tax. Okay, so that's also important. But the biggest area that we see of confusion in the church is whether the church musician is an employee or an independent contractor. Okay, in most situations, the musician is using the church piano or organ or guitar or drums or whatever other musical equipment they have. But even if the musician were to bring his own guitar or bring his own keyboard, okay, that wouldn't necessarily make him an independent contractor. If that musician played for several churches, that's still not enough to make him an independent contractor. Okay, there are a lot of employees that work for Chevron or some other type of company, and they bring their own pencil sharpener or their own mouse or keyboard, but that doesn't make them an independent contractor. That they may be entitled to an unreimbursed employee expense on their tax return at the end of the year, but they're still an employee of that company. Okay, if I worked for McDonald's and for Burger King and for Wendy's as a French fry person, that wouldn't make me an independent contractor. I wouldn't be a professional French fry person. Okay, I would be an employee that has multiple jobs. Okay, and it's the same thing with your church musician. There's a criteria that's required to classify them as an independent contractor, and church musicians just don't meet that criteria. It just doesn't happen. Now, if you have a musician that is so talented and so blessed in their gift that you can't afford to lose them, give us a call and we'll instruct you and consult you on how to handle that. Okay, but
what if you got people just in and out and they're not under your control?
Well, again, most times the church does control whether it's the pastor or the trustee board. Someone is usually in control. You instruct the musicians especially to show up on Sunday for morning worship. They have to show up on Sunday if there's an evening worship or a 3 o'clock service, if there's YPWW, if there's a Wednesday night Bible study, Friday evening choir rehearsal, okay, they're required to show up. And if they don't show up, then there's going to be a problem. Okay, so that alone makes them an employee.
Talk to some pastors, they'll tell you they have a problem.
Oh yeah, we've seen situations where the pastor controls the type of music that's being played. Yeah. So.
Well, that's right. He should have some control there too. But the point being that you have to know the difference, and if they really have some questions about what the difference is, they need to give you a call, and that number is 281-441-4431. Okay, that's the third area that you brought up.
Mm-hmm. The other thing that's important, especially this time of year, because it's the beginning of the year, because it's tax time, is ministers' compensation. Ministers, I mentioned earlier that your church pastor is an employee of the church. Well, your church pastor actually has a dual tax status, okay? When it comes to federal tax, they are an employee. But when it comes to Social Security and Medicare, which is FICA, they are self-employed, okay? And so they have a dual tax status, and the church is actually not allowed to withhold FICA tax or Social Security Medicare tax from a pastor's pay. Okay, he can allow them to withhold federal tax, but they're not allowed to withhold FICA tax.
Well, let's be clear on that now. So they can take out the federal tax.
Yes, sir.
But that Social Security is not coming out of that W-2.
No, sir.
Okay.
No, sir.
Okay, go on. I just want to be clear on that.
Yeah. And like I said, the minister or the pastor has a dual tax status. So basically what that means is when he files his tax return, he's going to report his federal tax on his tax return.